Who made this dish? The voice sliced through the dining room like a blade of glass, halting silverware mid-air and snapping quiet conversations into silence. Monique Carter froze where she stood by the service station, a small plate still balanced in her left hand, her right trembling ever so slightly. She didn't need to look to know who had spoken. Gregory Langford. White, powerful, billionaire. He sat alone in the far booth near the front windows, a pale gray linen suit wrapped around his tall frame like it belonged on the cover of Forbes. The man was known not just for his money but for his exacting standards. And now he was staring at the plate in front of him like he'd just seen a ghost. Behind the counter, Derek Vaughn, the floor manager of Hearthside Cafe, looked up from his clipboard. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the man in the booth, then turned sharply toward the kitchen door. Monique's breath caught. She knew exactly what had happened. It was her lunch. A personal plate she'd thrown together quickly from leftover kitchen scraps, crispy pan-roasted chicken from last night's prep, sweet potatoes mashed with cream and cinnamon, green beans sautéed in butter and cracked pepper. Nothing fancy, just something warm and homemade for a tired body and a soul that had stopped dreaming. She had left it on the corner counter, away from the main service line, but in the rush of lunch hour, a busboy must have grabbed it by mistake. And now the billionaire had eaten it. Derek stormed across the floor, his face a shade darker than the crimson apron he wore. "Carter," he hissed. "Tell me you didn't serve that." Monique stepped forward, her voice low. "It was a mistake. Sir, I made it for myself. I think someone must have." "You think?" he spat, spinning on his heel to face her fully. "Do you understand what you've done? That's not on the menu. That's not costed. That's not approved." The room had gone quiet. Even the customers had stopped eating. Langford stood now, slowly, eyes locked on Monique. "Did you prepare this dish?" he asked, his tone even, but firm like a man used to answers. Monique's throat tightened. Her palms dampened. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "It wasn't meant to be served." "Then why was it?" His voice sharpened. I made it for myself," she stammered. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was taken." Langford didn't blink. He looked at her the way a man might study a painting from a past life, familiar, but impossible. "This tastes exactly like a dish I had 15 years ago, at Maison Belle, in Manhattan." The name hit her like a dropped plate, shards of memory scattered everywhere. Behind her, Derek scoffed. "Maison what? Sir, with all due respect, our staff doesn't come from five-star restaurants." Langford ignored him. He took a slow step closer to Monique, speaking not with anger, but precision. "There was a chef there, Monique Laurent. She created a dish exactly like this. Are you her?" Monique's mouth went dry. She opened it, then closed it. Her knees felt unsteady. I used to be." The room held its breath. Derek spun on her. "You lied on your application?" he shouted. "You left that part out, didn't you? You brought this embarrassment on the house." Monique flinched. "Please, I didn't mean for." "You cooked unauthorized food and served it to a guest." Derek's voice rose to a roar. "That's grounds for immediate termination." She stepped back, her voice cracking. "Please, Mr. Vaughn. I've worked here 3 years. I've never had a write-up. I didn't mean to break policy. I was just hungry and—" "No excuses," he snapped. "Get your things. You're done here." The weight of those words dropped into her stomach like a stone. Her job meant more than just a paycheck. It was stability, rent, school shoes for her son, medicine, routine. Without it, she had nothing. She felt her throat close. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please, don't do this. I need this job. I'll scrub every dish. I'll work doubles. Just, please." Gregory Langford's brow furrowed. He looked at her differently now, not just with recognition but with something deeper. Memory. Gratitude. "I remember you," he said, softer now. "Thursday nights. You served that dish to me almost every week. I was 30. I just lost my father. I was drowning, and your food kept me breathing." Monique's eyes shimmered, but she held still. "I don't know what happened to make you disappear," he said. "But this dish didn't just nourish me. It reminded me that something beautiful could still exist even when everything else fell apart." Derek scoffed behind them. "Whatever sentimental thing this is, It doesn't change policy. Gregory turned, his tone sharp. Are you really going to fire her for making the best dish I've had in a decade? She broke protocol. Langford pulled out a business card and held it out to Monique. Then let me make her an offer. No. She stared at the card, unsure if her hands were shaking from fear, shame, or something dangerously close to hope. I'm opening a flagship restaurant downtown, he said. It won't be just about luxury, it'll be about meaning. About soul. Come see me tomorrow, let's talk. Derek's mouth opened in protest, but Gregory turned on his heel and left the cafe without waiting for permission. Monique stood there, card in hand, the weight of humiliation clinging to her skin, but something else rising beneath it. She hadn't meant to be seen today, but somehow, someone had. If this story moved you, give it a like and drop a comment with where you're watching from. You never know, someone nearby might be watching too. Monique stood in the cramped break room of Hearthside Cafe, the door barely closed behind her, the thin walls still humming with the aftermath of Derek's voice echoing through the dining room. Her heart hadn't slowed since Gregory Langford had spoken her old name aloud. Monique Laurent, a name she hadn't heard in years, a name she had buried so deep that even her son didn't know it. She leaned against the counter, hands gripping its edge, knuckles white. The smell of bleach and old coffee clung to the air. Her apron, still tied tightly around her waist, felt like a noose. 3 years she had worked here, quietly, dependably. She never arrived late, never forgot a table's order, never once made a fuss. She did her job and she did it well, because jobs like this weren't easy to find when your resume included an abrupt, unexplained exit from the New York culinary world and a last name that once dominated food columns. And now, with one accidental plate of food, it was all unraveling. She pulled the business card from her apron pocket and stared at it. The embossed lettering read, Gregory Langford, Langford and Ashbury Group. Below it, his direct number, handwritten in clean block print. Her stomach twisted. He remembered the dish. That exact dish. The one she'd created out of grief, of necessity, of instinct on a Thursday night at Maison Belle. 2009. That was the year David died. Her fingers curled tighter around the card. David Laurent, her husband, her only anchor during the chaotic rise of her career. He'd been a third-year resident at Columbia Presbyterian, working shifts so long they blurred into each other, but he always came to the restaurant on Thursdays, just before closing, to wait for her. He'd sit at the bar, tie loosened, and tell her about his patients. She'd bring him that same dish, pan-seared chicken with sweet mash and greens because it was simple, comforting, honest. And then, one night, he didn't come. An administrative mistake, a mislabeled medication. A young woman with a peanut allergy died. David was the attending. The hospital launched an investigation. The press caught wind. Someone leaked his name. He was suspended pending inquiry. But the damage was done. Protesters. Accusations. The strain broke him. 3 weeks later, he stepped in front of an express train. And just like that, Monique Laurent disappeared. The door creaked open, and Felicia, the youngest waitress on staff, peeked her head in. Monique, Derek says you need to clear your locker. Monique nodded silently, her throat too tight to speak. I think it's unfair, Felicia whispered. That plate smelled better than anything we've served in months. Mine's. Monique gave a small smile, the kind you offer when gratitude is too heavy to carry aloud. As Felicia left, Monique sat on the small bench by the lockers. She slowly untied her apron and folded it with precision, her hands moving out of habit chef's hands, trained to move cleanly, efficiently, without waste. The room was still, then came a soft knock at the side door. She opened it to find Tyrell, her 17-year-old son, sweat on his brow, backpack slung low. They called, he said, breathless. From the music academy. They said the tuition payment didn't go through. Monique's gut clenched. What? They said if we don't pay the balance by Friday, I can't register. I won't be able to start next semester. She looked at him, tall like his father, jaw set in quiet panic. He had inherited David's thoughtfulness and her drive. He didn't ask for much. But music was the one thing he loved. I'll figure something out, she said, brushing sweat from his forehead. We always do. Tyrell glanced past her into the break room. Did something happen? She hesitated. I might not be working here anymore. He stared at her. Because of that dish? She gave a slight nod. Was it really that good? He asked. Monique looked down. It was honest. A pause. Then Tyrell pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of notebook paper. They need $3,000. That's what's left after the scholarship. I tried calling my piano teacher, but she took the paper, nodding even though her world had just tilted again. Tyrell shifted his weight. We'll figure it out. Maybe I get a part-time job. Or I defer a year. No, she said firmly. You'll walk through that school's doors in the fall like you earned it. Because you did. He watched her carefully. Who was that man today? The one at the table? Monique paused. Someone from a long time ago. Someone who remembered who I used to be. Tyrell tilted his head. Are you gonna call him? She didn't answer. Just looked back down at the business card, then at the folded apron in her lap. That night, after Tyrell fell asleep on the couch with headphones on, Monique sat at the kitchen table in their two-bedroom apartment. The lights dim, the hum of the fridge, the only sound. She opened her old laptop, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then she searched. Maison Belle NYC, 2009. Her name still appeared. Archived articles. A cover photo from Culinary Arts Monthly, with her arms crossed and a chef's knife in hand. Headlines like The Queen of Soul Food Fine Dining and Monique Laurent redefines comfort cuisine. It was like opening a box of forgotten heirlooms, beautiful, painful, too heavy to carry. And yet, the man from that booth had remembered her. The flavors, the Thursday ritual, the warmth. He hadn't forgotten. She picked up the business card again, ran her fingers over the name. Then, at exactly 9:17 p.m., she dialed the number. It rang twice. Langford, came the voice on the other end. There was a beat of silence. This is Monique Carter, she said. I'm ready to talk. The next morning, Monique stood outside a sleek, glass-paneled building in the heart of Charleston's business district. Langford and Ashbury Group was etched into the stone facade in tall, silvery letters. Her fingers clutched the handle of her handbag, knuckles pale against the leather. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, her past surged back: sleepless nights in New York kitchens, the bitter smell of bleach at Hearthside, David's soft laughter, the screaming silence after his death. And now, this impossible second chance wrapped in a white business card. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air-conditioned lobby was quiet, elegant, and unmistakably expensive. Original art lined the walls. The receptionist, a young black woman in a navy blazer, greeted her warmly and asked her to wait. Within minutes, a tall assistant appeared and ushered her upstairs. Gregory Langford's office overlooked the water, sunlight reflecting off the glass towers of the city like diamonds on the harbor. He stood as she entered, offering a polite smile and a firm handshake. Monique, he said simply, as if her presence had been inevitable. Thank you for coming. She nodded, carefully lowering herself into the leather chair across from his desk. I almost didn't. I figured, he replied, but I'm glad you did. There was a silence between them, tense, respectful, heavy with history. I owe you an apology, Gregory said, for putting you on the spot yesterday. I didn't mean to expose you. She shrugged slightly. You didn't expose me. That plate did. It deserved to. She held his gaze steady now. So, let's not waste time. What do you want from me? Gregory smiled, not smugly, but with the relief of someone who'd been waiting for a conversation like this for a long time. I'm opening a flagship restaurant, he began, downtown, in the new development near the harbor. It's called Revive. We've invested millions into design, sourcing, staffing, but we haven't found the soul. Not yet. Monique raised an eyebrow. And you think I'm the soul? I know you are. That's a risky bet, she said. I haven't run a kitchen in 15 years. I haven't written a menu since Obama's first term. And I've never cooked for people who didn't think I was just the help. Gregory leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. Monique, I'm not asking you to recreate Maison Belle. I'm asking you to create something new. Something honest. Charleston has plenty of fine dining, but it doesn't have anything like what you made me taste yesterday. That was comfort. That was memory. That was soul, she finished for him, half smiling. Yeah, I know. He chuckled. Exactly. She exhaled slowly. And the catch? No catch, he said, but then added, just expectations. I want you to run the kitchen, build your team, design the menu, but you'll need to go public eventually. The press will ask questions. You'll be the face of this restaurant. Monique looked away, out the window. The face that disappeared after tragedy, she murmured. Gregory didn't push. He waited. I'm not good with cameras, she said finally. I don't need you to be good with cameras. I need you to be good with people, with food, with your team. She studied him. Why me? He paused, then said softly, because you fed me when I was lost. You didn't know it. But every Thursday night, I sat in your dining room trying to save a company I wasn't ready to lead, trying to survive a father's death and 1,000 expectations. And every time I took a bite of that dish, I remembered I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. Monique blinked rapidly. He continued, you did that. Not with truffle foam or gold leaf, with chicken. Sweet potatoes, buttered greens. You made ordinary food taste like a second chance. She swallowed hard. You remember all that? I never forgot. She nodded slowly. I don't want charity. This isn't charity. It's a partnership. No. Another silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable this time, but cautious. Finally, Monique said, can I see the space? Gregory smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. They drove to the waterfront. The building that would become Revive was still in construction beams exposed, walls unfinished, but the layout was already beautiful. Tall ceilings, open kitchen, warm wood tones. Monique walked slowly through the future dining room, fingers brushing against the raw brick walls, imagining tables filled with people, laughter, the scent of roasted garlic and rosemary. Gregory stood back, watching her. This space is yours, he said. You make it what you want. She turned. It'll take more than walls and hope. I'll give you whatever you need. Staff, equipment, funding. She hesitated, then nodded once. Then I need a test kitchen. I need 3 days. Let me work. See if I still have it. Gregory extended his hand. You've got it. She shook it, firm and sure. As they walked back toward the entrance, he asked, do you have a signature dish in mind? She smiled faintly. Not yet, but I've got a few ghosts I'd like to feed. 3 days later, Monique stood in a pristine test kitchen inside Langford and Ashbury's Innovation Center. The space smelled of lemon cleaner and freshly sanded wood. It was quiet, too quiet for her liking, but the stainless steel gleamed, and every drawer closed with that satisfying hush only new equipment could make. Her apron was tied tight, her hair pinned back. In front of her were ingredients she'd personally selected that morning from local markets. Fresh collard greens, stone-ground grits, farm eggs, thick cuts of bone, in pork, and a small bundle of rosemary she'd sniffed twice before placing in her basket. Real food, familiar food. She stared at the ingredients for a long moment before picking up the chef's knife. Its weight settled in her palm like an old friend. The blade gleamed under the soft light as she made her first cut clean, smooth, confident. Gregory had honored his word. No investors. No press. Just her and the kitchen. A blank canvas with no noise, yet the ghosts were loud. She could still hear David's voice, low and amused, teasing her for humming while she prepped. She could see the blur of the old Maison Belle kitchen during dinner rush, the scent of shallots sizzling in butter, her sous chef Diego singing out plate times in Spanish. She hadn't touched a commercial kitchen in 15 years, but as her hands moved coating the pork chops in mustard, dredging them in seasoned flour, setting up her cast iron pan, her muscle memory surged forward like a current. This wasn't just cooking, it was reclaiming. She placed the chops in the pan and listened. That perfect sizzle, the music of fire meeting flesh, bloomed in her ears like an old gospel song. 30 minutes later, the room was filled with the savory aroma of pan-fried pork, grits with cheddar, and wilted greens finished with smoked vinegar. A plate sat before her, garnished with only a sprig of rosemary and cracked black pepper. No tricks, no lace. She stared at it. She didn't want perfection. She wanted truth. Before she could call anyone, the test kitchen door opened. Gregory stepped in, dressed down in rolled-up sleeves and no tie, followed by a thin woman in tailored black with a laptop in one hand and a phone in the other. "Monique," he said, smiling. "This is Lena March. She manages our food brand development division." Lena nodded, eyes already scanning the counter. "Pleasure. I've been hearing a lot about you. I'd prefer you hear it from the food," Monique replied coolly. Lena blinked, surprised, then smiled slightly. "Fair enough." Gregory moved to the counter, and Monique set the plate down in front of him. She gave him no explanation, no preamble, just a fork. He took one bite of the pork, chewed, closed his eyes, then took a bite of the grits, swallowed slowly. "I know this," he murmured. Monique raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" He looked up. "Not this exact plate, but the feeling. Like I've been away from home too long and didn't know how hungry I was." Lena tasted next. She gave no reaction at first. Then, "This tastes like it came from someone who's been through some things." Monique gave a small nod. It did. They sat in silence as the rest of the plate disappeared between them. The room, for once, felt less like a showroom and more like a Sunday table after church. When the last bite was gone, Gregory set down his fork. "This is the dish. For the opening menu?" Lena asked. "No," he said. "This is the dish people will remember. The one they'll come back for when life kicks them around." He turned to Monique. "What do you call it?" She looked down at the now empty plate. "I used to call it pan-fried redemption." Lena looked intrigued. "Too dramatic?" Monique shook her head. "Too honest." Gregory stepped back, watching her. "Tomorrow we bring in the kitchen team. You ready to lead again?" She exhaled, slow and deliberate. "I've been ready for 15 years. Just didn't know anyone still believed in me." "No, I do," he said. "But more importantly, you believe in yourself again. That's what matters." Before she could reply, her phone buzzed. A message from Tyrell. "Mom." The academy called again. "I need to sign final paperwork by Friday. Any chance?" She looked at Gregory, then at Lena. "How soon can we make this official?" she asked. Lena smiled. "You're hired. If you want it." Monique nodded, almost in disbelief. "I want it." Tyrell Carter sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a folder filled with printed documents, highlighter in one hand, calculator in the other. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional scratch of his pen on paper. A pot of leftover rice warmed on the stove, forgotten. When Monique walked in, she paused in the doorway, watching him. He had David's posture, leaning forward slightly when focused, jaw clenched when stressed. She smiled faintly, then cleared her throat. Tyrell looked up, his face immediately tensed. "Well?" he asked. She set her purse down, pulled out a crisp white folder from under her arm, and slid it across the table to him. "Executive chef offer. Full-time. Benefits. Signing bonus." He opened the folder slowly, scanning the page. "This is real?" "It's real," she said, sitting down across from him. "Gregory Langford doesn't make symbolic gestures. He wants me to lead the kitchen at his new restaurant, Revive. I start Monday." Tyrell stared at the contract, then back at her. "You're really going back?" Monique took a breath. "Yes." He blinked, his voice quiet. "You said you were done with all that." "I thought I was. I thought I couldn't be that person again. But turns out, I'm still her. I just stopped letting myself cook like it mattered." He didn't answer. Monique reached into her bag again and pulled out a cashier's check, laying it on top of the offer letter. "Tuition. Paid. You're going to the academy." Tyrell's breath hitched. "You didn't have to." "I did," she said firmly. "Because you deserve it. Because we've both been surviving for too long. It's time we start living again." For a moment, he just sat there, absorbing it all. Then he pushed back from the table and walked toward the small upright piano against the far wall. "I started writing something," he said. "For my composition portfolio. I was going to scrap it because, well, things weren't looking good." He lifted the lid and sat down. Monique watched as his fingers found their place, hesitant at first, then flowing, like a stream thawing after a long winter. The melody that filled the room was soft and aching minor chords woven with hints of warmth, like sunlight trying to push through gray clouds. "I call it Ode to Her Hands," he said quietly. Monique swallowed. "I remember them," he continued, still playing. "Back when I was little. The way your hands moved in the kitchen. The way they wiped my tears. The way they shook when the news came about Dad. You never stopped moving, never stopped doing what had to be done." She turned away, wiping her face. The music slowed, faded, and ended on a long, lingering note. "I didn't think anyone remembered me like that," she said finally. "I did," he said, "even when you didn't." "Maisie." She walked over, knelt beside him, and kissed the side of his head. "Keep that song," she said. "You're going to need it someday." He smiled. "You're not going to make me change the name?" "No," she said. "It's perfect. Every note." As night settled over their quiet apartment, Monique knew that what she and her son had built through struggle and silence was something rare resilience passed from mother to child, not through words, but through action, through the heat of kitchens and the echo of piano keys. And now, for the first time in years, they both had a future waiting, one plated with purpose and scored with grace. The scent of freshly brewed coffee greeted Monique as she entered the revived construction site the next morning. Sunlight poured through the unfinished windows, casting golden beams across raw floorboards and scaffolding. The place still smelled of sawdust and ambition. Workers moved like quiet choreography in the background, hammering, drilling, measuring, each one contributing to the birth of something bold. Monique walked with quiet confidence, a clipboard under one arm, and her grandmother's rosary in her coat pocket, an old habit for new beginnings. Gregory Langford met her near what would soon be the open kitchen. He wore a simple navy sweater over slacks, a departure from his usual tailored armor. "You're early," he said, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. "I haven't slept much," Monique replied. "Didn't want to risk being late on my first official day." "I admire that," he said, then paused. "There's something we need to talk about before we go any further." The warmth drained from her face. "What is it?" He gestured toward the side of the construction space where a tall man in a fitted gray suit stood speaking with Lena March. Monique recognized him instantly from a half-forgotten magazine cover. Andrew Ferris, investor, restaurateur, media darling, and Langford's senior advisor on the Revive project. He didn't look at her. Not at first. "He came in this morning," Gregory said quietly. "He's seen the viral video. The test kitchen. He knows who you are." Monique folded her arms. So, Gregory hesitated. "He doesn't want you running the kitchen." There it was. The ghost she knew would return. "He said the optics are too risky," Gregory continued. "Your past, the scandal, he thinks it will distract from the opening. Says it could spook the other investors." Monique laughed, once, bitter and short. "He thinks people will stop coming because of who I used to be?" Gregory didn't answer. "So, what now?" she asked. "You back out of your offer?" "No," he said quickly. "I believe in you. But this isn't just my project anymore. We have other stakeholders." She looked at him carefully. "So what does that mean? You want me behind the scenes? Invisible again?" "No," Gregory said. "But we may have to delay your public announcement. Let Lena take the lead at first. Ease the board into the idea. You want to use my food, but not my name," she said flatly. Gregory winced. Monique stepped back, the old shame wrapping tight around her ribs. "You said I wouldn't have to hide anymore. You said this was about heart. Soul. Not PR. "It is," he insisted. "But this is also business, Monique. Give me time. Let me fight for you." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You have until tomorrow morning," she said. "Then I walk." Gregory's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Monique turned away, her footsteps echoing against the unfinished floor as she walked toward the back kitchen. Lena followed her in. "I didn't know he was bringing in Ferris," Lena said. Monique opened the fridge, ignoring her. "I'll talk to him," Lena continued. "I know how this looks, but we need your voice in this kitchen, your flavors, your fire." Monique took out a bundle of kale, then paused. "I'm not giving them another version of me to edit down," she said. "I've spent enough years being quiet so other people could be comfortable." She laid the kale on the cutting board and began stripping the leaves with sharp, clean movements. "You know what the problem is with people like Ferris?" she said, her voice calm. "They think redemption is a press campaign, something you announce with a publicist. But redemption has nothing to do with headlines. It's about what you do when no one is watching. It's what you cook for yourself when the world's walked away." Lena didn't speak. Monique looked up, meeting her eyes. "They either take all of me," she said, "or none at all." Monique stood in the apartment kitchen later that night, staring at a yellowed envelope tucked between the pages of an old cookbook, The Soul of Southern Cooking, a worn gift from David during their second Christmas together. She hadn't touched it in years. She ran her fingers across his handwriting on the envelope. "For you when you need to remember." It was dated the 4th of March 2010, 3 days after his funeral. Her breath caught as she slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. The ink was slightly faded, but his handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, lean, a surgeon's script. "Mon, if you're reading this, something's gone terribly wrong. I hope I'm here to explain it, but if I'm not, I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You didn't kill me. The pressure did. The silence did. The world, expecting perfection from people who are barely holding it together. You cook love into everything you touch. You remind people what home tastes like. Don't stop doing that. Not even for a minute. Not for them. Not for me. Love, David." Monique sat down slowly, the letter trembling in her hands. She had carried this guilt for 15 years, like a backpack full of bricks. Every shift, every bill paid late. Every yes when she wanted to scream no. She had survived, but she had never stopped punishing herself for surviving. And now here he was again, telling her to forgive herself, to cook, to live. She wiped her face and set the letter beside the cookbook. Then, she opened the pantry and pulled out the cast iron skillet she hadn't touched since New York. Seasoned black from years of love and oil. She ran her hand across the handle. "Okay," she whispered like a promise. The next morning, Monique entered the Revive site earlier than anyone else. It was still dark outside. But she didn't need light for what she had to do. She tied her apron, rolled up her sleeves, and began to cook, not for guests, not for critics. Not even for Langford, but for David. For Tyrell. For herself. She started with the base. Stone-ground grits, slowly simmered with cream and a hint of bay leaf. She let them whisper while she seared duck legs, basting them in garlic butter and rosemary. She tossed baby carrots and parsnips in brown sugar, cumin, and thyme, and roasted them until their edges curled. By the time the sun stretched across the counters, the kitchen was filled with aroma and memory. Gregory arrived just before 9. He stepped inside, surprised by the warmth already radiating from the kitchen. "You're here early," he said. "I needed time," she replied without turning. He moved closer, watching her plate something on a rustic dish, nothing fussy, no vertical garnishes, just honest food. She slid it toward him. "Eat first," she said. "Talk later." He sat without argument. The duck confit fell off the bone with the gentlest nudge of his fork. The grits were so creamy they bordered on decadent. The roasted vegetables tasted like Thanksgiving after a long absence. Gregory ate in silence. When he finished, he looked at her, truly looked. "This is your voice," he said. Monique nodded. "It always was. I just forgot how to speak." He leaned back. "I talked to Ferris again last night." Her jaw tensed. "And?" "I told him the offer stands. Public. Proud. No compromise." She blinked. "He agreed?" Gregory smiled faintly. "Not yet. But I'm not moving forward without you. You're not some background miracle worker. You're the chef. You deserve the title, the credit, and the damn menu." Monique exhaled, her shoulders easing for the first time in days. "I'm not looking to be anyone's redemption story," she said. "You're not," he replied. "You're your own." The Revive test kitchen was no longer quiet. 24 chefs, some fresh out of culinary school, others seasoned but jaded, stood in a semicircle around the central island. All eyes were on Monique. Some curious, some skeptical, one or two downright dismissive. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down like a hot lid. Lena stood to the side with a clipboard, and Gregory leaned casually against the back wall, arms folded, saying nothing. Monique cleared her throat. You've all been invited here not just to apply for a kitchen position, but to help define a restaurant that doesn't exist yet. Revive is not going to be a place of egos and theatrics. This is not a stage for foam and smoke. A ripple of laughter passed through a few of the younger chefs. One with a sleeve of tattoos rolled his eyes. Monique kept going. It's about memory, flavor, care. If you want a title more than you want connection, you're in the wrong room. The space quieted. Here's how this works, she said, walking behind the counter. I'm not interested in resumes. I'm interested in how you cook when you think no one important is watching. So today, you're going to cook me a plate that tells me who you are. She turned to the pantry door and pointed. You'll each have 30 minutes. The pantry is stocked. Proteins are in the fridge. I'm not looking for complexity. I'm looking for truth. Truth? Someone muttered under their breath. She heard it, chose not to respond. Let's begin. Chaos began almost immediately. Feet scrambled toward ingredients. Hands grabbed spices off the racks. Voices called out for pans and mixing bowls. The kitchen became a moving body muscle. Breath, heat. Monique didn't cook. She watched. One young woman made a pasta dough from scratch in record time. A man in his 40s, graying at the temples, handled a fillet of trout with such reverence Monique made a mental note to interview him later. Then, as she scanned the group, she saw a younger man barely 22 staring into his station, hands shaking. She walked over quietly. Problem? He looked up. I've never been asked to cook something personal. I usually follow recipes. What's your favorite meal? She asked. He blinked. Honestly, my abuela's arroz con pollo. She used to cook it for me every Saturday. Then make that, Monique said. Make it the way you remember it. He nodded slowly. Okay. Half an hour later, the plates were lined up. Every single one was different. Some were beautiful. Some were awkward. One was clearly undercooked. But every single one spoke, in its own dialect. Monique tasted each one, carefully, respectfully. She asked questions, listened more than she spoke. When it was over, she looked at the group. Some of you will get callbacks, she said. Some won't. But every single one of you reminded me why I love this work. Because food is the most honest language we have. Gregory stepped forward. We'll reach out with next steps within 48 hours. Thank you for being here. As the chefs filtered out, Lena approached Monique. That was bold, risky, even. Monique glanced at the empty plates. So is building something worth remembering. Then she turned to Gregory. Can I show you something? He nodded, and she led him to the walk-in cooler, opened a labeled container, and pulled out a small jar of peach preserves. My grandmother made these every August, she said. I found her recipe last night. Thought I'd add a touch of home to the dessert menu. Gregory unscrewed the lid, dipped a spoon in, and tasted. His eyes widened. You just told your story in a spoonful. Monique smiled. That's the goal. Nah. By mid-morning the next day, Monique had returned to the test kitchen to clean and reset the space. The energy from the cook-off lingered in the air, faint traces of garlic, butter, and ambition. Her shoulders ached from standing, but there was a calm steadiness in her hands now, like they'd finally remembered their purpose. She was wiping down the steel counters when Lena burst into the room, phone in hand, eyebrows raised so high they nearly touched her hairline. Monique, she said breathlessly, you need to see this. Monique put down the rag. What is it? Lena handed over her phone, already open to a video on social media. It was a handheld clip, grainy, a little shaky but unmistakable. It showed Monique in the test kitchen from yesterday, standing tall in her apron, her voice ringing out clearly. I'm not looking for complexity. I'm looking for truth. Whoa. The camera then panned to the plates, the young chefs, the colors, the sweat, the care in every dish. There was a close-up of Monique slicing peaches, talking about her grandmother, her hands moving with quiet reverence. It cut to a moment where Gregory Langford tasted her preserves and simply said, You just told your story in a spoonful. Meh. The video faded out on Monique's face, steady, proud, lined with years of work, and then a caption appeared. Who says second chances can't taste better than the first? Monique stared at the screen. How long has this been up? She asked. 6 hours, Lena said. It already has 1.2 million views. 70,000 shares. Food bloggers are reposting it. Hashtags are trending. Number, Chef Monique. Number, Soul Food Reborn. Number, Revive with her. Monique's chest tightened. I didn't authorize this. I know, Lena said. It was one of the culinary interns. He thought it would be good publicity. Good for who? Before Lena could answer, Gregory entered, phone already in hand. I just saw it, he said. It's everywhere. CNN wants an interview. Bon Appetit just reached out for a profile. This thing has legs. Monique crossed her arms. That wasn't the agreement. You promised me space. Privacy. Gregory's smile faded. I didn't leak it. But we can't undo it now. She paced toward the back wall, trying to slow her breath. The memories were rushing in flashbulbs. Headlines. Reporters shouting questions about David, about negligence, about blame. This was exactly what I didn't want, she said. To become a symbol again. A headline. A product. You're not a product, Gregory said. You're a story, and the world finally wants to hear it. I didn't ask them to, she snapped. No, Lena said gently, stepping closer. But you cooked like someone who had something to say. People listened. Not because of scandal, because of how your food made them feel. Monique looked at both of them, her voice low. I've spent the last decade trying to make people forget who I was, and now you're telling me to lean into it? I'm telling you not to hide, Gregory replied. You said yesterday that redemption isn't a press campaign. I agree. But this? This is something else. This is people seeing what's been buried and calling it beautiful. There was a long silence. Then Monique nodded, once, slowly. Fine, she said. If this is how it begins, then it better be on my terms. What do you need? Gregory asked. A press statement, she said. From me, not from your office. A video, not a press release. I want to say it in my words. Done, he said. And I want the team to know that they weren't just background footage. They helped make this happen. We lift everyone, no exceptions. Of course, Lena said. Monique straightened. Then let's cook. 2 days after the video went viral, Monique sat in Gregory's office, staring at the open laptop on his desk. The screen displayed a food blog article with a familiar headline, Fallen Star Returns, Monique Laurent's comeback or PR ploy. Her jaw tightened. I knew it was coming. They always circle back to the fall before they ever talk about the rise. No. Gregory leaned forward, his face unreadable. This is just the beginning. The story's growing faster than we can manage. Some of it's good, most of it, in fact, but the food world's divided. Some people want to celebrate you. Others are picking apart your past like it's still unfinished business. Monique clicked through another tab. Comments flooded the article. Where was this energy 15 years ago? If she really cared about food, why'd she disappear for so long? I'd eat her food. Just don't ask me to believe she's a hero. She closed the laptop softly. They don't even know what happened. They only know what they were told. Then tell them, Gregory said. Monique shook her head. I'm not here to relive David's death for their entertainment. I came here to cook, that's all. Lena entered with a tablet and a tight expression. We have a bigger problem. She handed Monique the device. The screen showed a social media thread from a well-known celebrity chef, Kyle Dresden, blue checkmark, 3 million followers. Respect to real chefs who built their careers the right way. Not everyone deserves a comeback story just because the internet gets sentimental. Beneath it, hundreds of likes, dozens of other chefs chiming in, some cryptic, others blunt. Monique's face didn't flinch, but something in her chest went still. They see this as a threat, Lena said softly. You're not playing by their rules, and that terrifies them. I didn't ask for their stage, Monique replied. I just want to cook for people who are hungry for more than image. Gregory crossed his arms. We can respond. Release the full interview we recorded. The one where you talk about the work, not the tragedy. Recenter the conversation. No, Monique said. Not yet. He frowned. Why not? Because I want the food to speak first. Let the opening tell the story. No dramatics. No defenses. Lena hesitated. There's one more thing. Monique looked up. The investor board is calling an emergency session tomorrow. They want to discuss the public reaction. Let me guess, Monique said. They're considering pulling me from the lead role. Lena nodded. Ferris is pushing hard. Says the restaurant's reputation is at stake. Gregory stood. I'll handle it. Monique held up a hand. No, I'll be there. He blinked. Monique, you don't have to. Yes, she said. I do. That evening, Monique walked into her apartment and found Tyrell at the kitchen table with his keyboard pulled out, working on a new composition. He looked up, concern immediately rising in his eyes. You okay? He asked. She nodded, pulled off her coat, and sat beside him. The world found out, she said, and now it's deciding whether I'm worth remembering. Tyrell tilted his head. But they already tasted your food. She smiled gently. That's the part they can't undo. The flavor always lingers longer than the headline. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I wrote something new today, he said. It's not done yet, but it's about how people try to erase you, and you have to play louder. Monique's eyes glistened. Play it for me. As the notes filled the small space they called home, Monique closed her eyes. Outside, the storm of judgment brewed, but inside, in the music and warmth, she found clarity. Tomorrow, she wouldn't defend her past. She would stand in it. The boardroom on the 22nd floor of Langford and Ashbury's downtown office was colder than Monique expected, not just in temperature, but in tone. Frosted windows stretched floor to ceiling, offering a perfect view of Charleston's harbor, but inside, the air was taut with tension. A long mahogany table divided the room. Seated around it were 10 individuals in suits, polished and poised, representing millions in investments and, more urgently, opinions. Monique sat alone on one side, no apron, no cutting board, just a navy blouse and her name badge from the test kitchen still clipped to her belt, a quiet declaration of who she was, where she belonged. Gregory sat beside her, his jaw tight, eyes unreadable. At the head of the table, Andrew Ferris adjusted his cufflinks and cleared his throat. We've convened today, he began, because while we all admire the culinary results coming from the Revive project, there has been considerable public discourse about its executive chef, some of which poses reputational risk. The phrase sat like ice on the table. Monique didn't blink. Risk, she said softly, is a funny word. It usually means someone's afraid of telling the truth out loud. Ferris offered a tight smile. Miss Carter, no one here questions your talent. What we're asking is whether your visibility is best for this brand at this time. Visibility, she repeated, or identity. Another board member, a woman named Miriam Harris, spoke up. There's a narrative here that's powerful, yes, but also unpredictable. Do we really want the opening of Revive to be about someone's personal history instead of the food? Monique folded her hands calmly. They're not separate. The room shifted, uncomfortable. Ferris leaned forward. Let's be clear. If we launch this restaurant with you as the face, we lose control of the narrative. The media has already branded you the comeback story of the decade. That's no longer in our hands. It never was, Gregory said firmly. Ferris looked at him. Greg, you've built your legacy on control, on precision. Don't let sentiment blind you to strategy. Gregory stood. I'm not blinded. I'm finally seeing clearly. Monique is the reason this restaurant has soul. Without her, all we have is another polished shell with overpriced risotto. A few heads nodded silently. Monique rose slowly. You can't revive something without honoring what was lost. That's what this restaurant is about. Second chances, healing, truth. Not just on the plate, but in the people making them. She looked directly at Ferris. You brought me here because of the way my food made you feel. Now you want to cut me out because my name makes you uncomfortable. He said nothing. She continued, her voice unwavering. I've cooked through grief, through silence, through shame, and somehow, that pain turned into nourishment. I didn't plan that, but it's real, and people taste it. You can't fake soul. Gregory placed a hand on the back of her chair, quiet support, but powerful. We're not asking for permission, he said to the room. We're offering partnership. Revive doesn't work without Monique. That's not a threat. It's a fact. Ferris's mouth twitched. He glanced down at his notes, then at the rest of the board. After a long pause, Miriam cleared her throat. I propose a vote. Not on whether Monique leads, but whether we move forward with this project in full transparency, celebrating the story, not avoiding it. 7 hands rose, then 8. Ferris didn't lift his, but he didn't speak again. Monique exhaled slowly, feeling something she hadn't felt in years acknowledged. As they exited the boardroom, Gregory glanced sideways. You didn't flinch, Unsi. I wanted to, she said, smiling faintly. But then I remembered I'm not cooking for their approval. I'm cooking for the ones who've been overlooked. He nodded. So what now? She stepped into the elevator, her reflection catching in the mirrored wall. Not hidden, not buried, whole. Now, she said, we open a kitchen that makes noise no one can ignore. The soft clink of silverware and the low murmur of voices floated through the unfinished dining room of Revive. It was early evening, and the exposed brick walls glowed under hanging Edison bulbs strung for atmosphere, even if the drywall wasn't yet complete. Long communal tables were set with white linen napkins and mismatched vintage plates, a deliberate design choice Monique had insisted on. Let it feel like Sunday dinner, she'd said. This was the pre-opening tasting invite only. Food critics, community leaders, small business owners, and a few influential figures in the local culinary scene. No press badges. No PR scripts. Just food, heart, and the raw gamble of honesty. Monique stood just behind the kitchen doors, watching it unfold through the small circular window. She wore her chef's whites, but had swapped the stiff coat for her old Maison Belle apron worn, faded, the name embroidered in cursive still barely visible at the hem. Behind her, the kitchen was humming. No shouting, no chaos. Just rhythm. She had handpicked every sous chef and line cook over the last 2 weeks. Many were young, some fresh out of school. One had just been released from a culinary re-entry program for formerly incarcerated individuals. Another was a single mother who used to cook in shelters. They weren't the typical brigade, but they moved like one. Gregory entered the kitchen quietly, holding a tablet. The first course is going out now. You want to say anything? Monique looked up, thoughtful. No speeches. Let them taste first. That's how this started. That's how it should begin again. Gregory nodded and stepped aside as plates of sweet corn hush puppies with charred scallion aioli were carried out light, warm, and full of nostalgia. The dish was Monique's way of saying, hello. As the servers returned, eyes wide and whispers following close behind, Monique's breath quickened, not fear anticipation. The second course went out. Braised short ribs with stone, ground grits, and a drizzle of sorghum glaze. Silence followed, then clinking, then slow nods from guests whose palates had tasted everything and yet, not this. She stepped onto the floor, finally, and the room noticed. Conversations dipped in volume. Some guests straightened in their chairs. One woman stood and clapped twice, as if to say, you don't need an introduction, we know. Chef Monique, a familiar voice called out. It was Miles Borden, a notoriously sharp critic from Southern Table, seated with Miriam Harris from the board. Miles raised a glass. You didn't just revive a menu, he said. You've revived a feeling. This food isn't just soulful, it's honest. Like it's daring us to remember what good food used to feel like. Polite applause rippled across the room. Monique's voice carried calm and clarity. We've forgotten how powerful simple food can be. How it can reach across grief, across years, across mistakes, and still say, you belong here. That's what this place is about. She didn't stay long in the spotlight. She returned to the kitchen, where the third course was being plated. Peach cobbler with buttermilk biscuit topping and cinnamon whipped cream, her grandmother's recipe. Preserved without a single modern twist. As the final plates went out, Lena entered from the back. Critics are already texting colleagues. I heard Miles say it's the most emotionally grounded meal he's had in 20 years. Monique didn't answer right away. She was watching the young cook from 2 chapters ago, the one who had once trembled during the first trial, now moving with confidence as he wiped down a plate and nodded to his station partner. She turned to Lena. Then that's the story we lead with. Not mine, ours. Outside, someone started a standing ovation. Forks clinked against glasses. Chairs pushed back. Gregory entered, smiling. They're chanting your name. You coming out? Monique wiped her hands on her apron. Tell them I'll be out in a minute. I want to see the sink spotless." Gregory laughed and left. "And Monique?" She turned back to the young crew and said, "Let's finish strong. The world just walked through our door. Let's send them home full and humbled." The next morning, the scent of burnt toast filled Monique's apartment kitchen. Tyrell had forgotten to lower the setting on the toaster again. She waved a towel at the fire alarm until it gave up its protest, then turned back to see her son sheepishly holding the charred slice with tongs. "I swear this toaster has it out for me," he muttered. Monique grinned. "It's not the toaster, baby. You just have an overconfident wrist." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that came easier now, in this new rhythm of their lives, the kind that was no longer interrupted by eviction notices or buried guilt. But the lightness didn't last long. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Lena. "Call me. Now. Urgent." Monique's smile faded. She stepped onto the fire escape for privacy, the cool Charleston air brushing her face as she dialed. Lena answered on the first ring. "There's a firestorm." Monique tensed. "At the restaurant?" "No. Online. Someone leaked sealed court documents about David's death. They're claiming he left a note, that it implied you were responsible." Monique didn't speak, not for a moment. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "There was no note," she said finally. "I know," Lena replied, "but the internet doesn't wait for facts." "Who leaked it?" "Could be anyone," Lena said. "Ferris? A disgruntled chef? Someone from the old days who wants a piece of the spotlight. Doesn't matter. It's everywhere now." Monique looked out over the quiet alley below. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The world, indifferent to personal hells. "I thought this was behind me," she whispered. "I know. They're going to make me relive it again." "Yes," Lena said gently. "But this time, you don't have to do it alone." That night, as Monique arrived at Revive for the second soft opening, the vibe had shifted. Whispers floated like steam through the entryway. A few guests looked at her, not with admiration but curiosity tinged with doubt. She stepped into the kitchen and found Gregory already waiting. "You saw it," he said. She nodded. "You want to cancel tonight?" "No," she said, tying her apron. "We serve. We speak through food." Midway through the service, a local news anchor approached her table and, not so subtly, asked if she'd be willing to comment on the recent revelations. Monique didn't blink. "I'll comment in dessert. Wait for the cobbler." Back in the kitchen, she gathered her team. "I need every plate to hit with purpose tonight. Don't overthink it. Just cook what we believe." They nodded. 30 minutes later, peach cobbler went out as the final course, served in small cast-iron skillets, still bubbling at the edges. On top, a biscuit crown dusted with cinnamon and powdered sugar, and beside it, a note tucked into each napkin. It read, "There was no note from David, not the one they claim. But if there had been, it would have said this: let her cook, let her live. No, I am not a headline. I am a flame. I burn, yes, but I feed, too." Monique. The room fell silent as diners read, then a single clap, then two. And then, without prompt, the room rose. A standing ovation, not just for a meal, but for truth served hot. Without apology, Gregory appeared beside her, voice low. "You didn't flinch." "I did," she said, "but only inside." The restaurant was quiet the next morning, a rare silence before the heartbeat of prep work and service began again. Monique unlocked the door herself, stepping into Revive's sunlit dining room where the light played across reclaimed wood and unfinished dreams. She had expected this chapter of her life to be a slow simmer. Instead, it had come to a rolling boil. She carried a brown paper bag under one arm, filled with fresh rosemary, Meyer lemons, and 2 jars of her grandmother's tomato jam. No matter how loud the world became, she grounded herself in ingredients that couldn't lie. As she walked toward the kitchen, she found a familiar face waiting leaning against the prep table, arms crossed, smirk barely hidden. Kyle Dresden. "Thought I'd stop by," he said casually, but his voice carried weight. "Heard you've been feeding Charleston more than just food lately." Monique's eyes narrowed. "You want a reservation? You'll have to go through Lena. I didn't come to eat." "Then you can go." He pushed away from the table, circling slowly. "Funny thing about ghosts, Monique. You let one into the dining room. Pretty soon you've got a haunted restaurant." She folded her arms. Is that what this is? A warning? Or just a bitter man trying to stay relevant? Kyle laughed. You're good. Always were. But don't fool yourself, this isn't about talent. It's about who controls the narrative. You stole attention I spent 2 decades building. Now people are calling you the soul of Southern cooking. That's a throne, Monique. And there's only room for one. I didn't ask for a throne, she replied. I asked for a stove. Kyle leaned in. And yet here you are, center stage, applause ringing, and suddenly everyone forgets the scandal, the silence, the truth. She didn't flinch. They remember something more important, the taste. He paused. You won't survive the winter. The food world eats its own. This spotlight? It burns. Monique stepped closer, voice calm but cutting. You think I haven't burned before? I've cooked with grief in one hand and doubt in the other. I've been exiled, erased, overlooked, and I'm still standing. You want the spotlight? Stand under it. But don't try to block mine with your shadow. Kyle's smirk faded. She turned her back and walked toward the stove, flipping on the pilot light. The soft click-click of ignition filled the air, then the soft whoosh of fire. I'll show myself out, Kyle said finally, his voice low. She didn't turn around. As the door shut behind him, Monique stood still for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into the paper bag and took out the rosemary. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply pine and memory, and something almost holy. Gregory entered moments later, coffee in hand. Did I just see Kyle Dresden walking out like someone kicked his pride in the ribs? Monique smiled faintly. He came to throw shade. Gregory sipped. And? I reminded him I cook with light. No. It was late afternoon when Monique walked out onto the patio behind Revive. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of oak and a coming rain. She needed a moment away from the kitchen, away from the endless questions, stares, and weight of expectation. The past few days had felt like a marathon of reckoning. And now, standing under a steel-gray sky, she let herself breathe. Her peace didn't last long. Excuse me, came a voice behind her, low, male, hesitant. She turned. A man in his mid-60s stood near the edge of the patio. His salt and pepper hair was combed back, blazer rumpled as though he'd been sitting in a car too long. His face was vaguely familiar, but it took her a moment to place him. Then it clicked. Judge Alan Whitmore, the man who had presided over the inquest into David's death. The man whose dismissive tone and subtle skepticism had haunted her for years. Monique's shoulders stiffened. You're a long way from the courthouse. Mo, he nodded. I imagine I'm the last person you want to see. You imagined right. Whitmore approached slowly, his hands clasped behind his back like a schoolboy caught cheating. I came here because I needed to look you in the eye, he said. Not as a judge. As a man who failed to see you. She said nothing. I read your name in the papers this week, he continued. And I remembered how I dismissed you all those years ago. I listened to what the lawyers said. The experts. The headlines. But I never once listened to you. Still, Monique didn't speak. I told myself I was being impartial, he said. But impartiality, in a world already tilted, can be a form of blindness. Her voice was quiet when it came. Do you know what it's like to bury someone you love, and then be treated like a suspect? Whitmore lowered his gaze. I can't imagine. No, she said, eyes steady. You can't. I didn't come here for redemption, he said. I came to say I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Mike-ein. The words hung in the air like wet leaves, heavy. Unexpected. Monique crossed her arms. You can't undo what you did, what you didn't do. I know, he said, but if you're willing, I'd like to offer something. She raised an eyebrow. I've recently joined the board of a local culinary initiative helps fund scholarships for underrepresented chefs. We're looking for someone to lead a mentorship program. Teach. Inspire. Rebuild trust. He handed her a card. Monique looked down at it. Palmetto Culinary Justice Initiative. She held it between 2 fingers, then looked back at him. Are you doing this for me or for yourself? Maybe both, he said honestly. She studied him, the deep lines around his eyes, the worn shoes, the weight of years spent in power, finally softened by consequence. I'll think about it, she said. He nodded. That's all I ask. As he turned to leave, she called after him. One more thing. He paused. You remember how I sat in that courtroom? Alone, trembling. You remember the way people looked at me? Whitmore nodded. Don't let another woman sit through that again, she said. Not on your watch. Not ever. His eyes met hers. I won't. He left without another word. Monique stood alone for a long while, the card still in her hand. She didn't know if forgiveness lived at the end of this chapter, but maybe, just maybe, it started with a table wide enough for truth and a seat left open for grace. Sunday afternoon brought with it the soft clatter of pots, the rich perfume of roasting tomatoes, and a hush of anticipation that moved like incense through Revive's dining hall. The restaurant was closed to the public today by design. The doors weren't locked, but only a few select guests had been invited. They came slowly, on foot, in pairs, in wheelchairs, in Sunday suits worn thin at the elbows. They were residents of the East Battery neighborhood, the area Monique had grown up in back when it had sidewalks cracked with moss and porches filled with grandmothers who didn't need Google to know a recipe by heart. Gregory passed out glasses of sweet tea by the entrance. Lena helped a retired schoolteacher to her seat. One of Monique's line cooks, Jamal, greeted his former foster parent like a celebrity. There were no cameras, no critics, just community. Monique stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching every seat fill. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a reunion. A thank you. A promise that Revive belonged to them too. Tyrell approached from the back, a thin folder tucked under his arm. What's this? She asked. He handed it over. Sheet music. I wrote something for tonight. Instrumental, but it's got your heartbeat in it. She blinked. You wrote a song for dinner? No, he said. For you. He smiled and disappeared toward the makeshift stage they'd set up in the corner, where an upright piano waited. Monique exhaled, then nodded to the crew. Let's plate. The menu was simple but intentional. Smothered chicken with gravy that shimmered like gold. Collard greens with ham hock. Spoon bread with molasses butter. And roasted okra finished with lemon zest. But it wasn't just food, it was memory. Monique paused at each plate, adjusting a garnish, smoothing the edge of a smear. She moved like a woman not chasing perfection, but honoring presence. As the first dishes reached the tables, Tyrell began to play. The music wasn't flashy. It was slow, confident, full of pauses that felt like breath. Some diners closed their eyes. Some tapped their fingers. Others just sat still, letting the chords curl around their plates like warmth. Midway through the evening, an elderly woman stood. I remember you, she said, pointing at Monique. You used to bring your lunch to church wrapped in foil, and that peach cobbler your mama made had us all sneaking into the fellowship hall early. Laughter rippled. Monique smiled. That was my cobbler. Gasps and more laughter followed. You lied in church? Someone teased. I fed the hungry, Monique said. That's gospel, far as I'm concerned. As the sun dipped behind the city, casting long golden streaks across the restaurant floor, something shifted. This wasn't a grand opening. It was a homecoming. Gregory came to her side, wineglass in hand. You did it, he said. You built a place where food has memory. Monique looked out across the room, faces lined with stories, plates scraped clean, music filling the air like mercy. No, she said. We did it. And we're just getting started. The following Monday, Monique arrived at Revive early, earlier than even the bread delivery. She loved the quiet before prep began, the holy hush where light slanted across the tile floor, and the scent of coffee hung like prayer in the air. But something was different today. On the host stand, there was a box, unmarked, no logo, just a plain cardboard cube sealed with care. She carried it to the kitchen, opened it slowly, and paused. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, some typed, some messy with smudged ink, each one addressed. Chef Monique Carter. She sat at the prep table and began to read. My daughter wants to be a chef now. She saw your video and said, she looks like me. Thank you for making her believe she belongs. I was at Maison Belle the night the lights went out. I never got to tell you that your duck confit changed how I saw Southern food. Welcome back. They tried to cancel you, but grace doesn't expire. Meh. There were stories from women who had been pushed out of kitchens, from single dads who cooked from borrowed recipes, from old men who said her collard greens tasted like their mother's. Some sent photos, some sent recipes. One enclosed a wrinkled paper napkin with the words, "You fed my soul." Monique folded her hands on the table, her eyes brimming but steady. She heard a soft knock. It was Lena, standing at the door with 2 coffees. "You saw the box," she said, sitting across from her. Monique nodded. "Who sent these?" "Everyone. No one." The staff made a call for messages on social last week quietly. It spread. Monique picked up one more letter. This one had no return address, just a scrap of lined paper torn from a notebook. "I was a dishwasher once. They made me feel invisible. You make people feel seen. I haven't eaten your food, but I tasted your story, and I'm full." She closed the letter and exhaled. Lena leaned forward. "You've become more than a chef, Monique." "I didn't want to," she said softly. "I just wanted to feed people. Maybe that's exactly why they're listening." That evening, Monique added something new to the menu. Not a dish, a ritual. Each night, one letter from the box would be read aloud in the kitchen before service, to remind the team and herself why they were there, why food mattered, why truth tasted like salt and fire and sometimes forgiveness. The staff gathered before the first seating, a letter in Lena's hand. She read, "Dear Chef, I lost my husband last year. Your story reminded me that healing doesn't always come fast, but it comes warm. Thank you for reminding me that dinner can be holy." Monique swallowed hard, then smiled. "Let's make something sacred tonight," she said, and the line cooks nodded, not out of duty, but because they understood they weren't just making dinner anymore. They were making memory. The final reservation of the evening wasn't listed on the books. There was no name, no time, just a quiet heads-up from the host. "There's a woman outside asking for Chef Monique. Says she knew your mother." Monique was wiping down the counter after service. The night had gone smoothly. The last cobbler plated. The final spoon returned to the kitchen with nothing but praise and butter left on the dish. She felt calm, settled, until those words. She walked toward the front, where the lights had dimmed and jazz played low through the speakers. The woman stood near the door, dressed in a vintage coat too heavy for the Charleston spring. Her hands clutched a manila folder. Her eyes were searching. When she turned, Monique recognized her instantly older. Yes, but unmistakable. "Miss Delilah?" Monique said softly. Delilah Washington had been her mother's best friend, almost an aunt, though not by blood. She had disappeared after Monique's mother passed, years ago. "I heard about the restaurant," Delilah said, stepping closer. "Saw you on the news. I wasn't sure if I should come." Monique offered a hesitant smile. "Why now?" Delilah held up the folder. "Because your mama left this. Told me to give it to you when you were ready." Monique took it with both hands. The folder was worn, edges soft like it had been carried for years. She opened it. Inside were clippings, recipes in her mother's handwriting. A photo of the two of them standing outside their first apartment. Monique no taller than a stock pot, her arms wrapped around her mother's legs. There was also a letter, folded carefully. She unfolded it and began to read. "Baby girl, if you're reading this, it means you've come home. Not to a place, but to yourself. I always knew your heart would bring you back to the kitchen, back to the fire. The world won't always love you the way you deserve. But cook anyway, speak anyway, love anyway. Because food is more than survival, it's a way to leave something behind. Don't be afraid to be the flame. Love you always. Mama." Tears slipped silently down Monique's cheeks. Delilah touched her hand. She was proud of you, even when the world wasn't. Monique nodded, throat too tight for words. Then she looked up, a question forming. "Stay for dinner?" she asked. Delilah smiled, her eyes soft. "I thought you'd never ask." "Mapes." Monique led her to the back patio, where the kitchen staff had gathered after hours. She plated something simple. Leftover grits, a fried green tomato, and a spoonful of tomato jam. They ate in the hush of the closing night, under string lights that glowed like stars. Terrell played something quiet on the piano. Gregory poured wine. Lena passed out slices of cornbread still warm from the oven. And in the center of it all, Monique sat with Delilah past and future at the same table, no longer running from memory, but embracing it. Revive wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was her monument, not to pain, but to what survived it. The stove hissed, the plates clinked, and outside, the city pulsed on. But in that moment, all was still. All was full. The story of Monique Carter teaches us that true resilience is not about silence or survival, but about rising through truth, even when the world misjudges you. It reminds us that food, like justice, carries memory, and that sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from clearing your name, but from reclaiming your voice. In a world quick to erase, Monique chose to feed, and in doing so, she revived not just a kitchen, but a community's belief in grace, second chances, and the fire of a soul that refuses to dim.